Top 10 Blacklisted Hollywood Stars. It's no surprise in Hollywood, then, when personalities clash. And clash they do, at times spectacularly. Regardless of who is to blame and whether or not it's deserved, some careers take major hits from these conflicts. No matter the star's size and brightness, no Hollywood celebrity is immune to being shunned by their red carpet peers. 10. Charlie Chaplin. The origin of the unofficial Hollywood blacklist is pretty dark. It began as a consequence of McCarthyism. Republican Senator Joseph McCarthy's efforts to root out suspected communist spies and sympathizers in the United States in the 1940s and 50s. During this time, a task force called the House Un-American Activities Committee held hearings in which they accused hundreds of citizens of affiliation with the Communist Party. This led to mass blacklisting of accused parties, as movie studios stood to lose a lot of money if their movies starred suspected communists or communist sympathizers. 9. Randy Quaid. While Chaplin was a victim of a hostile political landscape, Randy Quaid is a victim of himself. Attempting to summarize his and his wife's extensive professional and legal battles is an endeavor in exhaustion, especially because the list grows every year. Quaid has had numerous warrants out for his arrest for a number of reasons: fled the US for Canada to avoid court, fled Canada for the US to avoid court, been sued by a host of different entities for various reasons. He's also spread unfounded claims that the 2020 election was rigged and that a hit squad that specializes in actor assassinations is after him, having already killed Heath Ledger. 8. Sandra Locke. Sandra Locke was a promising young star, earning herself an Oscar nomination for her very first role in The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. For the next 2 decades, she starred in numerous films and even directed several herself. In 1975, she began dating A-list actor and director Clint Eastwood. Though happy at first, her relationship with Eastwood would result in her professional undoing. 7. Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson used to be a big deal. Like The Rock, Big, Mad Max, Lethal Weapon, Braveheart, and The Passion of the Christ can attest to that. But in the mid-2000s, a series of vitriolic tirades brought him low enough to be nearly invisible. In 2006, Gibson was pulled over and arrested while speeding and drunk. He chose to make the situation exponentially worse by going on an anti-Semitic tirade to the arresting officer, who was himself Jewish. Things slowed down for Gibson after that, but it wasn't until another incident in 2010 that it all ground to a halt. He was recorded leaving his then-partner Roxana Grigorieva a voicemail in which he said that, "Wow, well, I can't write that." 6. Rose McGowan. Rose McGowan was one of the women of Charmed and was in Scream and Jawbreaker. She was young, she was talented, and it was reasonable to expect her career to only go up. And yet in the late 90s, it stalled suddenly. Now, McGowan has said a lot of controversial things over her career, but none of that is responsible for her blacklisting. What ultimately stalled her career for about 2 decades is far worse, and no fault of her own. 5. Stacey Dash. Stacey Dash is mainly known for Clueless, both the movie and television show. Throughout the 90s and 2000s, her career was on par for a young 90s television star. Not many major starring roles, but at least she consistently worked. That is, until the 2010s when she traded her liberal views for conservative ones and became outspoken about them. 4. Katherine Heigl. Remember Katherine Heigl? I remember a period where she was everywhere. Starring roles in Roswell, Grey's Anatomy, Knocked Up, and 27 Dresses kept her on everyone's TV sets for a long while. And then one day, she seemed to drop out of the spotlight. The truth is that Heigl has a tendency to burn her bridges after crossing them. She has an enduring reputation for being difficult to work with, failing to show up for call times, refusing to leave her trailer, complaining about catering, and other behaviors that make her a less than desirable hire. Too many, she's just not worth it. 3. Roseanne Barr. Roseanne has always been outspoken, never shied from political content, and always kept up her tough, working-class persona. It was her charm, and the world loved her for it. Roseanne was one of the 90s sitcom mega-hits, and its legacy, combined with her stand-up career, earned her decades of notoriety and goodwill. Then her irrelevant political jokes became offensive political ideology. 2. Charlie Sheen. Charlie Sheen was a household name for decades because of his acting, first in serious roles like Platoon and Wall Street, and then for fantastic sitcom runs on Spin City and 2.5 Men. And who doesn't love Major League? Then, in the middle of 2.5 Men's 8th season, Sheen managed to become an even bigger household name. This time, it was because a series of inexplicably eccentric interviews and stunts made him the single biggest meme generator that year. 1. Brendan Fraser. The best is last. The last 4 celebs who arguably blacklisted themselves had to bring the list down so this last star could raise it higher than it ever was. That star is, of course, Brendan Fraser. Throughout the 90s and 2000s, there was no one cooler. Fight Me. With starring roles in fan favorites Encino Man, Airheads, George of the Jungle, Bedazzled, and the Mummy trilogy, Fraser was a defining figure for a young generation. Even his small guest spot on Scrubs as Dr. Cox's friend Ben is to this day an extremely memorable cameo. But in 2003, his career took an immediate nosedive for the worst reason.